Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for joining us. And we've got another exciting recording today. And we want to talk about ethics and artificial intelligence. We're speaking with someone today who is very passionate about this space and is doing wonderful work within the AI field. And without taking much time, I'll ask Johan Steyn to introduce our guest today. Johan?
Zenzele, good, thank you. Welcome to the third recording of the year. It's February. And our guest today is Wright, who is a South African boykie, if you would, but who is living in the UK. And I've had a number of interactions with Connor, and I just love listening to where his heart is and the questions he's asking. So it'll also help us older people, Zenzele, I'm not speaking on your behalf, but definitely about mine, to hear about where students and younger people are in this new technology era. So Connor is a fourth-year philosophy student, and the philosophy behind this technology is definitely something we're going to unpack. He's at the University of Exeter in Devon. He's also, interestingly enough, the partnerships manager at the Montreal AI Ethics Institute, definitely something we're going to speak about. He's a TEDx youth speaker, and he's a For Humanity contributor. From a very warm South Africa to what I assume is a fairly cooler England. Connor, welcome. How are you keeping?
Yeah, thank you, Johan. Thanks so much for the introduction. Thank you, Zenzele, as well. Fantastic to be on here. Fantastic to be a guest and be able to chat through some of these seriously important issues about what's going to become and already is a very serious technology.
Absolutely right. Connor, so tell what I would love to hear is two things. Is this connection between studying philosophy but being interested in this technology, and secondly, your involvement with the Montreal Institute. If you can maybe start off with that.
Yeah, with pleasure. So for me, studying AI came about because of philosophy, rather than the other way around. So philosophy was always something I wanted to do. I loved Gray. I loved debating the kinds of ethics involved with different situations. I loved looking at something and saying, what are all the different kinds of angles that can be sort of considered within this problem? And that's where I sort of said, right, I want to study philosophy at university. And then having decided that, and then I went to my South African dad, and I said, Dad, I want to study philosophy at university. And he's like, Connor, are you just going to die with your thoughts? And I'm like, you know what? Very good question. And so my parents then both got behind me, and we both, or sort of all of us, found AI. And we found something that I was able to apply philosophy to, my favorite type, and I was able to sort of see that this is going to be something that progresses, that I can then buy into and I can then have an effect on as well. So that sort of conditioned me and how I wanted to sort of study philosophy as well. Is that what kind of material that I want to engage into, what kind of subjects that I want to look into, and it sort of had an influence on me and how could I then apply to AI? How could my learning now then go into how I'm looking at this technology? And for me, philosophy, what is one of the main things that it's sort of almost taught me, almost shown me, is that we shouldn't take everything at face value. There's always something else to take into account, and there's always a different perspective. And I think that's showing up within the AI realm as well. So we look at maybe facial recognition technology, and you look at all the security sides, but then you look at the side that's also with marginalized communities and how this affects those communities as well. So for me, studying philosophy has allowed me to basically see that there are multiple different angles always to take on a certain problem. And that even when you think that there's a solution that AI can solve, there's still something that you have to consider. There's still something that maybe you won't have considered in the development process. So for me, I think that's one of the main things that philosophy has taught me, and it's what I've been able to express at the Montreal AI Ethics Institute as well. So I've been lucky enough under Abhishek Gupta's leadership and mentorship to be able to express myself and engage with this community, engage with the material as well. So I've been able to talk about and give talks on facial recognition technology, but also get to talk to some amazing people like yourself, Johan, in the space as well, and how this sort of everyone has a different perspective. And I think having gone through and been in this position for a year and a half, that's one of the main lessons I've taken, is that there's always some form of diverse perspective that needs to be taken into account. There isn't a black or white, this is good, this is bad. There is evidently a lot more consideration to be had. And I think in my position there, I've been able to talk to so many different people from so many different backgrounds to see that, wow, AI in Mexico has a lot more different considerations to have than AI in the UK or AI in China or AI in South Africa. And there's all sorts of different perspectives that everyone can bring to the table and everyone can sort of almost act upon as a result. So for me, I think being involved with May, where I've interacted with these basically business people and influencers in order to put on events and to organize those, and through my research summaries that I've written, is that I think diversity is a big factor in it, and I think that's been an absolute pleasure to see that combine and have a good synergy with my philosophy, and say that, wow, there's so many different things to consider as well.
Awesome, awesome. I like what you say, because it's very important to look at the impact of these technologies on society. One of the things that you also like is the philosophy of Ubuntu and how you bring that together with AI. But there's something that is very interesting. When I was reading your bio, you currently working in the intersection of anthropomorphism and AI. I wanted to understand that. It's quite a big word, you know.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand what is that and how is it related to artificial intelligence?
No, it's a great question, and you can imagine that such a big word really takes a toll on your fingers when you type it out as well. So me having to type that out all the time, it really, you really learn how to spell it so you can get it done quickly. But for me, the main thing with anthropomorphism and AI, it's sort of not with the algorithmic side of AI and how AI is being used in business in that sense, but it's more to do with the sense of good old-fashioned AI. So like chatbots, like social robots that are basically designed towards soliciting human interaction. And so for my philosophy undergraduate, I have to write a dissertation, and this is sort of what I'm doing my dissertation on. So my title is Anthropomorphism is not necessary for placing trust in AI. And I basically, the way I like to express it and how I've expressed it to like family members and people who don't have as much experience in AI is like, basically I'm trying to make a trustworthy AI cake. And there are all sorts of different ingredients you've got to put into the cake. And I'm effectively, my argument is that you can't make this trustworthy AI cake with just eggs. So you need flour, you need sugar, you need all the other spices and ingredients. And effectively, anthropomorphism are the eggs, is the eggs. So I can't just make this trustworthy AI cake with anthropomorphism. So just because it looks like a human, acts like a human, talks like a human, doesn't mean we should immediately place trust in it. I haven't made the cake yet, effectively. So for me, it sort of can link to wherever you want, because I'm also working on a book with it as well about trustworthy AI with Aniceto Perez, who's a fantastic author, and he's written a book on facial recognition technology as well. And we're working towards sort of how anthropomorphism plays into trustworthy AI. And it can link to sort of misdirection and deception, where you think, like in the movie Her, that you're talking to this fully sentient and fully emotional basically technology, where you start developing feelings, and then you start getting manipulated effectively by through whether emotional means, or you can also look at how people use this kind of technology to have people pass over their bank details because they use a chatbot that the agent thinks is a human, that they're interacting with a human, and then they basically, through this kind of development of a relationship, give over personal details that they're actually just giving over to a machine. So you can take it that way as well. But for me, it's the role anthropomorphism plays within AI is much more of a supporting role than perhaps has been interpreted in the space beforehand, because there are plenty of studies about how it appeals to basically the primal human attributes, primal human senses as well, in the sense that, right, we see something that moves and acts in an unexpected way, so it must be some form of like autonomous. So then let's interact with it, let's treat it as autonomous, and then that's how we interact with the technology. So I think for me, when you're looking at this kind of thing, what I argue in my essay is that this appeals to our propensity to trust. It's something that looks human and looks familiar. It's definitely something that we're more likely to interact with. But this doesn't sort of appeal to what a trusting relationship looks like. So I don't think anthropomorphism fulfills certain conditions that you need for a trusting relationship to be established, such as bidirectionality, where I'm able to accept or reject someone else trusting me. I can say no, and someone else is able to accept or reject my trust that I want to place in them. And I don't think being anthropomorphic allows for that. So an AI could never reject my trust. It'll always basically, because it's designed to solicit human interaction, basically do whatever allows it for more interaction in that sense. So for me, that's sort of where I go with my argument and how anthropomorphism links in. And a very interesting segment is the disinformation and deception side of things.
Oh, yes. Oh, man, I tell you, since Zenzele started mentioning the word anthropomorphism, I was going to pick me. I want to say something. Great answer, Connor. And for my sins, I've studied classical Greek. So anthropos meaning man or mankind, and morphos meaning change or shape. And that's what, when we think, if you Google robot, you will almost 99% of the time see a picture that looks like us in a way. 2 little eyes, little nostrils, ears, hands, and feet. But we know it's essentially algorithms. But I read a piece about how you can take, if you've got recordings, voice recordings of a loved one whom you've lost, you can actually put it into this platform that will, through natural language understanding and the like, be able to keep on continuing this experience of speaking with this person, because you can ask them almost anything, and the algorithm or the system, the platform, will speak back to you in the voice of your late mother or late partner or whatever. So what I want to ask you on that is, because I think it can offer great comfort. In fact, I heard somebody say the other day how they use deep fakes to help people with psychological problems and stuff, because I've only heard really the bad stuff of deep fakes, and there are some bad stuff. But this idea of sticking with anthropomorphism, if I have a ex-partner, wife, child, parent who's gone, but I keep on hanging on to them through algorithms, who's mimicking them through anthropomorphic technology, it doesn't feel right. I don't know if you have any views on that. I don't know. Look, it's such a new thing that we're still grappling with it, but I thought I would love to ask you about that. Is it unhealthy to do that, do you think?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and definitely very topical as well. And I'd say a key word you use there is mimic. So mimic is key because it's never going to be your loved one. You could create an exact sort of robotic copy. It's never going to be your living, breathing loved one that unfortunately you've lost. And in that way, that's the key to focus on, is that it is mimicking. Like in a way, maybe you're sort of looking at a living, breathing photo. So just like a photo is that you'll never forget your loved one because you've got a photo with them and you've got all of these memories. In a way, you're manifesting that in a physical body, in a physical being, and that's fine. You can do that. It's another way to remember them. It's another way to be sort of okay with it happening. Maybe it's another coping mechanism, but also you can take it the other way, and it's that, as you say, Johan, that you're not really letting go. You're trying to bring them back and to replace them. And I'm sure in your Greek studies, you'll know that bringing people back from the underworld is not something you should really do. So in that way, I don't know if you're helping yourself by trying to bring that back to life. But if you're trying to bring that loved one back to life just by expressing it in a different way, so instead of having like some more photos made or a headstone, you'd rather have this kind of physical being where you can hear their voice still, you can still have comfort just for when it's getting seriously tough, then I think that's fine. But I think there's a line, basically. There's a line that you can definitely cross, and there's a line I think that can be very easily crossed where you start putting all of your eggs in this basket, and that becomes when the trouble starts coming in effectively.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I think it sounds a little bit scary, but I guess like you're saying that it depends on how you feel about it and so on. I wanted to talk about facial recognition technologies, Akona. I think it's one subject also that you are very passionate about, and I think when you look at facial recognition technologies, sometimes it infringes on human rights. So to say. Maybe my question is, how does this technology, facial recognition technology in particular, affect our human behavior? So social behaviors, for example, knowing that I'm being monitored to the city park, for example. How does it affect the behavior? I know as a philosopher, you would really be better placed to understand that.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question, and it's actually something I'm working on at the moment. So I'm looking at the phenomenology of facial recognition technology. So phenomenology as a practice originated in sort of post-war France, and it's about how we experience things. It's almost analyzing the structures of experience to see how do I know that this sort of table can be brown to me, and how sort of what are the structures in place that I'm allowing me to see that, and sort of how do I see myself? How do I locate myself in space and time? And then how that plays out as well. So I think for me, I'm looking at with the phenomenology of facial recognition technology is sort of how that affects our social behavior, as you say. So I think the key is to think of how when we are not being monitored, we are a subject, we're aware of what we are doing, we know what we're wearing, we know what the texture of the shirt is, how it feels in our skin, what we're carrying, if it's shopping bags or something like that. But then when you enter into a space where there is facial recognition technology sort of present, that's when you transcend from a subject to an object. So you're no longer a subject, you're now an object being analyzed, being watched, being monitored. And there's a great quote from a piece, and I can't quite remember the name, but I will sort of maybe link it and send it to you as well. And the authors say that we are as if we're performing on a stage in front of an impatient audience. So when you enter into the facial recognition technology space, you're almost it's no longer what you're doing in your standards. You're now having to adhere and perform to those who are watching you and what their standards are, whether that be a government, whether that be a private company. You're having to sort of behave and behave accordingly in that sense. So I think one of the examples I want to use is that I'm not sure if the viewers or us in the call have ever experienced when we're in the queue for an ATM machine. And we're in the queue, we're waiting, and as we're getting to the front of the queue, we start checking, okay, where's my wallet? Where's my phone? I've got my bag on my back. Is my zip open? Oh, maybe it's open. Okay, better take my bag off, close it. Okay, put it back on. Okay, is that person behind me, very close to me? Are they looking at me? Oh, what's my PIN? And so you have all of these thoughts kind of come into play. And then once you get to the front of the queue, like, okay, then I know what we're doing. And I think that's something similar to when you enter into a facial recognition technology space. It's sort of you become a lot more self-aware of yourself as an object. So you almost, instead of thinking of yourself, what do I think, what do I look like? You almost take like a third person perspective and say, what do I look like to others? What do others think of what I look like, what I'm doing? For example, maybe you've gone shopping and you've gone and bought like a kitchen knife or something like that. And I think as soon as you enter this kind of space, you're like, ooh, is this knife going to make me look very threatening? But it's just a kitchen knife. And I think these kinds of thoughts then get into you, and then I think contribute to you being perceived as an object. And one of the ways to think about it is an example from an existentialist philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre, very famous in post-war France as well. And he talked about his keyhole example. And effectively what he describes is that you as a subject are very aware of yourself, you're walking along, and then you look through a keyhole at a conversation. At this point, all your subjectivity has gone. You're just focused on this conversation. You're not aware of what's going on. You're not aware of yourself in space and in time. You're just looking at this conversation going on through this keyhole. And at one point, the conversation stops and these people look straight at you through the keyhole. They see you peeping in when you're not supposed to. And you feel ashamed. You feel extremely self-aware. and then you carry on your day as a result. And I think this is what happens effectively when you get into the facial recognition technology space. You're going about beforehand, looking through this keyhole, and then they look at you with cameras, and you're like, oh my goodness, am I looking okay? Is my shirt this, that? Are my shopping bags fine? Am I blocking someone? Are they going to arrest me here and there? And then this just goes to another level when you talk about minorities who, for whatever reason, whether the technology has not used representative data or there is some form of human bias within the process, are more likely to be targeted for whatever use the facial recognition technology is being used for, such as predictive policing. So there's been plenty of studies like Joy Bolamwini noticed how certain facial recognition technology performs better to a very high accuracy for white male faces, but poorly for black female faces, and almost like a 50% difference in terms of accuracy. So then you're getting into this space where it's like, oh, I'm really not welcome here because of my basically how I am as a person, color of my skin, because the data could be biased, the data could be misrepresentative. And as a result, these kinds of concerns just go to a whole other level as well. So I think in terms of social behavior, it's very, very interesting and something that I don't think is considered beyond the stats. They think, how accurate is this technology? But then they don't think about the consequences of that accuracy.
Wow. Connor, listen, every day in whether it's work meetings or meetings like this, because I write weekly for Business Day and for others. So often I think, just what am I going to write about next? And it's either through reading books or these conversations that I think, that's an idea. And yes, this is my next few articles, just from your last two answers. So I wrote down here, the awareness of being observed. That's a nice article title, I think. This minority representation is very important. The observer becomes the observed. What about if we think of romance? You mentioned the movie Her, which is one of my favorite movies. What if this is the title, Until Algorithms Do Us Part? You think of romance with bots and stuff, but man, there's a lot. I often think about George Orwell, who in 1948, when he wrote 1984, he spoke about, obviously we know Big Brother and all those things. I often think about this. He said, what if, and paraphrasing it horribly most likely, what if the television I'm looking at is looking back at me? And back then it was unthinkable. But we know our TVs look at us. They've got cameras. They see whether we're active or not, whether to switch off the power. If we're playing games, they see our movements and so forth. So there is a lot more to talk about. But what I would like to maybe ask as we end this off, Connor, is, you grew up in South Africa. You're in the UK now. Hopefully one day you'll come back. I don't know. But when you think of South Africa, our particular challenges, if you think of our digital divide, if you think of our children in our dusty rural areas, if you think of, I think to a large extent, the government that has digitally been failing its young people, just your views on that. Without being political necessarily, but what can young people do to keep on upskilling themselves? What can we in civil society? And so maybe just 5 or so minutes about this, all this stuff we spoke about today, but put the lens of the realities in South Africa, where you are from, on that, please.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about South Africa. It's my home. It's where my roots are. It's given me a lot in life, and it's allowed me to appreciate a different perspective on things. And especially throughout how I've conducted myself in AI, there's always that perspective. It's like, well, what happens if this was applied in South Africa? And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that South Africa has given me, is a different perspective. And it ties in very nicely with what I said about diversity. And I think having that and those cultural experiences that I had there, for the viewer, I lived there until I was 9. So I was born in Johannesburg. And I was unfortunately unable to participate in South Africa in my teen years and my more adult years. But then I still have very fond memories and a lot of influence from my childhood into my daily sort of interactions. And I think that's where the diversity comes in. I think, how can this apply in South Africa? And what I see South Africa is a lot of opportunity. I think there's a lot of talent there, and there's a lot of awareness of it. It's just, how do we harness that? So I think South Africa, for example, boasts a lot of information about Ubuntu, which is something that I'm very involved in and very passionate about. And for those who haven't engaged, Sabelo Malambi, who's a big honcho at Stanford University, is doing some fantastic work in the Ubuntu space. And one of my favorite AI papers is his about the cross-section and intersectionality between AI and Ubuntu, sort of a more culturally aware framework, a more interrelational framework, which is the beauty of Ubuntu. And for me, I think that captures it. It's being interrelational. It's seeing someone for who they are, and then how they allow you to be who you are. And for me, Ubuntu plays a central role, and South Africa in a sense as well, in recognizing the human within the AI process. So for me, when I see this kind of thing, whether there's discrimination or there's racial bias or there are privacy losses, I think, did someone in that process think about the humanity in this one? Did someone think about that person who is going to affect? And I think that interrelational side of things is exactly what we need. So one of my favorite things, unfortunately, to sort of see is the 90% fallacy, which for me, and sort of my understanding, is where a technology, let's say, is 90% accurate, or 91, 92, which is then taken to be 100% accurate, which is not true. You still got that 10% which gets affected. And I think South Africa is a good way of looking at that 10%. It's a good way of seeing that there are so many more people that can be adversely affected, that this 10% is very important. And I think by recognizing the humanity, by seeing that we are related and how that 10% allows us to be part of the 90% is very important. And I think in that way, you're sort of able to generate this kind of holistic, interrelational sort of framework and ideal that we're able to start crafting. And I think South Africa, through its history and the importance of that kind of interrelationality, I think is a perfect use case for it. So for me, I see a lot of talent, and my advice would be to get as involved with AI as you possibly can. So the key for me is always reading newsletters and communities. So if you're able to read through getting newsletters or through different papers, and then you're able to discuss it within community, then you'll be able to connect, you'll be able to get that different perspective, and also able to voice your perspective as well. So something I mentioned in my TEDx Youth talk in becoming authors of the AI story is that everyone has an experience and every experience counts. So when we're looking at this kind of technology, you are looking for that experience that you just cannot consider. So one of my examples is that we're creating a sort of language processing machine, and the team that are creating it can speak Swedish, French, Spanish, Italian, whatever, but there's no one who can speak an African language. So when you're trying to deploy that globally, how are you going to interact with the Zulu community, the Xhosa community? How are you going to put it in Sotho? So there's all sorts of different variations that this kind of experience, by you joining the AI debate and offering your experience, I think you'll be able to bring. And it's not like it's like, oh, that'd be nice. It's actually very necessary. So I think South Africa is a perfect place where the talent is there. We just need to get into the right space and be able to have our voices be heard. And I think work by Sabelo, I think work in Ubuntu as well is being a fantastic outlet for it. But there's always more opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, Connor, it's been a wonderful chat. Very inspiring, I must say. You're doing wonderful work. Keep on doing that great work. And we wish you all the best with your dissertation as well on this wonderful topic. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
No, my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me both. Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Zenzele. I look forward to keeping in touch.